I went to school to study to be a rabbi, which was a trippy experience. I kind of recommend it for some people if you're interested. I had a professor who asked an interesting question about the Old Testament, which we call the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, or it's a piece of the Old Testament is called the Torah. And he said, is this book sacred? And I'm not Orthodox, so I'm not an incredibly traditional Jew. As you can see, I'm not wearing a kippah and stuff like that. This was an interesting question for a non-fundamentalist, non-traditionalist Jew to say, is this book sacred? Very tough question to answer, And if it's sacred, why? I could ask a different question. What is sacred in your life? People go, family. Okay, is anything else that's sacred in your life? And what makes it sacred? What gives something the kind of authority that it transcends what we would call the ordinary to the level of sacred? Wow. And I would say there is a lot that's sacred. And the place that I start with this, with people who have a hard time with that notion, like the metaphysical notion of the sacred, is ancestors. If we study, anthropology and we go back historically and look at tribal peoples long before organized religions, before Judaism, Christianity, before Hinduism, I think most of those older shamanic tribal traditions were ancestor traditions. Even in Judaism, when we pray, we pray to our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, etc. Those are our ancestors. Okay, so there's something about our ancestors, those who have passed, that's sacred. And I would say, to somebody who's, let's say, an atheist and is wrestling with, entering into spiritual domains, how would you feel about pissing on a grave? Are you desecrating something? What if nobody ever knew about it? Like nobody saw you do it, you peed on a grave. Well, if there's no metaphysical reality, nothing sacred, who cares? The person's dead. Why wouldn't you pee on the grave? If there was some good incentive on the other side, right? But there's something that goes, I'm peeing on a grave. I wouldn't want to pee on the grave because we have a sense that that's a taboo. There's something sacred about desecrating the dead. Well, why is that? They're dead. Who cares? You're an atheist. They're fucking worms and fertilizer. Who gives a shit? But for most people still, there's something there. There's a boundary they don't want to cross. They say, well, there's actually something about that that's wrong. I'm like, in a relative way, just like wrong for some people, or is it wrong for everybody? And people, you push them hard enough, and they're thinking hard enough, and they're honest enough, there is something there that feels like it should not be violated. And for me, that is so important, especially in these times. We live in this, hyper-modernity with hyper-information and hyper-reality and, all these slogan-y terms. And it's like, but, if my kids aren't in touch with the fact that there are elements of life that are sacred, and in fact, if my kids aren't in touch with the fact that they're sacred, their being and their soul is sacred, I have a big problem with that. And so the recognition of the sacred as part and parcel of the spiritual, tradition that's been handed down to us, and as fundamental towards the kind of boundaries that allow a society to not only thrive, but probably just exist at all, is crucial.